Welcome to the Tortured Man, episode 14 for the Mancast. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Today's subject is race and crime in America. And I want to put it out there immediately. This is probably going to be offensive to some people because you have been lied to your whole life about some of the things that we're going to be talking about. You think that there's a lot of systematic things that are going on and a lot of disparity in certain ways. And you've, well, again, been lied to. It's not true. We have the statistics to prove it. We have an expert who also happens to be my partner in crime, Mr. Chad Brown, who has studied this for 10 years. So he knows a little bit more about it than I do. And we are going to flip it over to Chad and let him get this discussion underway. Chad, take it away, brother.
Well, the whole point of this podcast from when we started was supposed to be kind of about news, sports, and culture. And today we're going to talk a lot about culture. And because I believe the culture is at the center of our crime issue in the United States. Doesn't have everything to do with it, but I think it has a large part to do with it. And I think it's because we've built a unique culture here in the melting pot that we've created in the United States. And it stems from historical cultures that came over here. And we're going to get to that. We're going to get to the cultures that came and colonized over here in the South prior to American slavery or America, being even a thought. And but before we go back, I want to start with today. And the issue here today is we can't fix our problems because we can't have an honest conversation about them. As soon as you start to talk about statistics that people don't like to hear or that make them uncomfortable or go against the narrative that they've been, droned with their entire life, they immediately label you as something. And typically it is racist. I'll have you know right now, if you label me as racist for saying facts to you, it's meaningless to me. The word has no weight. You've wasted it. You've diluted it. You've used it too many times. So anybody whose their knee-jerk reaction is to say racist, I don't fucking hear you, okay? I'm not hearing you because you've thrown it around. Congrats, by the way. You've destroyed a word that used to have a lot of power and a lot of meaning, and you've made it worthless. It's a throwaway word now. It means nothing to so many people. But with that, save it. Save your breath. If you're going to come in the comments and try to call me racist for this conversation, save it. I'm just going to block you. I don't even care. I'm not even going to bother. With that, I contend that the biggest reason we have so much black on black crime, which is the core of our crime in America, it is the largest segment of crime in America. If you delineate it out to the core segments of crime, black on black is the number one. It represents the highest amount. 50% of all murders are blacks killing somebody. So when you represent 13% of the population, then boil it really down to black males of a certain age group, it's really about 3 or 4% of the population. That's a problem. And I continue that problem as my guy Delano Squires, who's a very brilliant man, a black thinker, and an academic. He says we have a problem with black leaders. We don't have black leaders on the left, in the middle, and we got very few on the right because they're not allowed to talk. And if they do, they're just on Uncle Tom, and their opinions and viewpoints are thrown away. So we need black leftist leaders and black centrist leaders. And he's saying it doesn't mean there isn't people representing that spot. There are. There's your Barack Obama and your Stephen A's and there's your guys out there gumming all the time, and they have lots of followers listening to them and parroting what they say. So it isn't like there's people finding leadership, but the leaders are not leading them. His point was they're leading white people. The only advice, the only coaching, the only thing they ever have to offer is to tell white people to do something, to tell white people how to change, to tell white people how to fix themselves. And they never look at their own people and say, let me coach you up. Let me help you do something that can help you, by the way. Instead of waiting for somebody else to change things, let me help you change things in your life that can make things different for you. And he was talking to, what's my boy? Used to be the sports writer in KC.
Jason Whitlock.
He was talking to Whitlock, and he's like, think about it like this. If your coach came into your locker room and he was like, here's what we're going to do to win this Sunday. I'm going to go over to the other team and I'm going to tell them all the ways they're going to help us be better. And I'm like, yeah, what if Andy Reid went into the locker room before the Super Bowl to Kansas City? He's like, you guys, I'll be right back. I'm about to go over and tell the Eagles how they're going to help us be better. I don't have anything else. I don't have anything to tell you guys how to do today, but I'm going to go coach the Eagles up on how to make us better. And I just thought that was such it resonated with me. It was a really brilliant comment. I mean, if you want to speak to that before I go on, I mean.
Well, I think it's interesting. It's a very valid point to bring up, especially when you're smart. You juxtapose two huge influences along that line. Barack Obama, who used to be president of the United States, and Stephen A. Smith, who probably has the largest voice in the sports media, and of course he is a black man. And here's what I'll say about that: Stephen A. Smith's audience is 95% white people. So, and I mean, you can just check that yourself. I mean, people who are living in the ghetto, single moms in the ghetto, raising children, and their teenage boys, they're out on street corners. They're not sitting there watching Stephen A. and his program that starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. They're just not. Yeah. And young people, generally speaking, aren't sitting around listening to an ex-president of the United States wax poetic because he can read a teleprompter and looks nice in his suit. They don't give a shit.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, they're cultural leaders. Instead of talking about education and finding an occupation, a career, being a good father, taking care of your wife, being a stand-up citizen, staying out of trouble. Instead of those things, they glorify violence. They glorify, tossing women aside. They glorify not being around your kids. I mean, this is the culture that created, and again, I'm going to go into how this culture was created.
But I don't you're making a good point. It is culture.
American black culture is different than any other culture on the planet other than one, and it's white redneck culture. And if you had something to say, I'm going to let you say it before I because that's a whole other tangent. It seemed like you had something else to say there.
Well, I think it's interesting. The Democratic Party in this country are the ones who they talk about systematic racism all the time. And they try to point it out everywhere where it's not. Systematic racism, where we do have it, is in our welfare system, where the Democrat Party has gone out of their way, and with help with the Republican Party, mind you, but they have gone out of their way to systematically destroy the nuclear family in the black community itself. The black community, if you just go back to 50 years, they were doing 100 times better than they are now. Their families were together at 72 to 74% clip. They didn't have the divorce rates they do now, or never even getting married to begin with. And the welfare system forces by law the father of these children not to be associated with the wives or the girlfriends and the children themselves, or the girl gets no dollars in welfare help at all, period. That's systematic racism brought to you by the U.S. federal government.
Yeah, so you've taught people the more you earn, the less we'll give you, especially if it's on the books.
Certainly.
So if you're going to earn any extra, make sure it's something that's illegal.
Like selling drugs on a street corner, for instance.
Bingo. If you have a man in the household, especially if you're married, we're definitely not going to give you anything. Right. But if you have more kids out of wedlock, we absolutely will give you more money.
More, and this term I hate more than any, baby daddies. The more you have, the more money you actually earn.
That's culture that created the term baby daddy and baby mama. We didn't have that before this.
So what we've done is we have made being on welfare, if you're a mother on welfare, you pass it down to your daughters who go on welfare, pass it to their daughters who go on welfare. We have institutionalized and industrialized being on welfare as a way to make a living in the inner city, mostly black, but for anybody in the inner city, Spanish people, Asian people, white people. If you're living in ghetto areas and inner cities, you're taught that this is a way of life that you should go out and make happen for yourself. and our government is behind it. It would be cheaper for us to pay to them to go to a 4-year university on a full ride than to be on 4 years of welfare. It's nonsensical.
Well,
And it's creating enormous crime rates in this country on top.
Absolutely. Fatherless homes create this. And then you get this hustling culture, this gangster culture, the flash, the violence, and don't get me wrong. I love most of the artists that spout that shit. I'm a big fan of rap. I always was as a kid, growing up and stuff like that. I listen to some hardcore gangster shit, man. NWA, I could spout you some shit. You've heard it. But it still doesn't mean that if that's who you look up to most in life, that's not problematic. Now, granted, a lot of these guys are taught and they got out of it, to the extent that they were in it, and they became millionaires and they're not out there shooting at anybody. But I heard a guy who made a really valid comment the other day. He was on YouTube. If I can remember him, I'll shout him out. I'll type it into the edit on this, but he was starting out. He's just doing a thing where he holds his phone up and he talks. He's a black dude and he's probably our age. And he's like, you know what's wrong with these fucking kids these days? You know why they're shooting each other? He's like, because they're all so emotional. He's like, they're just a bunch of little bitches. He's like, you say anything to piss them off and they don't want to throw hands, man. They just want to shoot you because they're too scared. He's like, they're scared, emotional bitches. What have we done? And he's right, dude. He's right, man.
Well, it's because there's no male figures in their lives to show them how to be a man. And you can't be a man if
what
you're
boys
trying
are teaching you.
Here's an interesting statistic that most people are not going to like, particularly feminists and particularly women in general. If you look at the statistics, the rate of children committing crimes, of children committing suicide, of children failing out of school, if you compare those statistics with a single mother and general society that has an intact home, you are anywhere from 3 to 8 times more likely, depending on which one of those things you want to point out, to fail in, and 8 times more suicide, 5 times more the murder rate, and single mother home. But statistically, for children that are in male-only homes, there is no statistical difference between them and a regular nuclear family. And I'm not pointing it out to say that the mothers are bad. I'm pointing it out to say how important fathers are for their children, because while mothers teach children certain things that they need to know for life, so do fathers. And when you remove one of them, some of that stuff being work hard, work ethic, honor, respectability, trustworthiness, the things that fathers teach, like if you're playing with a teenage boy or pre-teenage boy outside, and you're trying to teach him how to box and you knock him on his ass, you're not apologizing to him for it. We're boxing. You're going to get knocked on your ass. But if that boy has an older sister who's teaching him and she accidentally knocks him down, she's going to feel bad about it, right? Men just react differently to different situations, and it toughens you up. It gives you a thicker skin. It allows you to use your logical side of the brain and not immediately become overtly emotional. So if you're going to be an overtly emotional person about every little tiny thing that happens to you, eventually those emotions are going to run so high that the easiest way to make it go away is to become violent. Just be violent.
Right.
The hardest thing for a man to do is not be violent.
Well, and especially when you're young, man. When you're young, it's like that's the boom. You don't think, you're impulsive. The testosterone's coursing, man. That's the thing you do. But if you've had a good father to watch and to emulate, you've seen him take jabs and go, you know what? I'm not gonna let it fucking do this to me. I'm not gonna let it take me there, and to be the bigger man. And if you've seen that presented in front of you by your role model, your father, and that does something, right? You don't just feel like you need to go shoot everybody who disrespects you. But speaking of shooting everybody who disrespects, go ahead. You were gonna say something?
Go.
Speaking of people who like to shoot people who disrespect or just be violent at the drop of a hat, are one of our favorite guys, Thomas Sowell. He's done extensive, decades-long work on the history of Black culture in America, and has absolutely destroyed the narratives that it's racism that
and this is a man, by the
continually
way,
holds him back.
for our audience that may not know, Thomas Sowell leaned towards Marxism when he was at the university level, and that's what started to change his entire mind about things.
He was Marxist all the way up until he was at, like in the doctoral level, and he was working in a summer fellowship for the federal government, and he was actually working for the Labor Department, and he actually looked into why welfare wasn't helping people, and he tried so hard to just get the numbers from the Labor Department, and everybody around him was like, okay, cute young guy, that you're going to get that. Like, they're going to just divulge all that information. He's like, yeah, I'm still waiting all these years today, you know? And this is what he was teaching at Cornell. And he said, what freaked him out was I think this might've been in the 90s. He says, or no, so fast forward to the 90s, he's teaching at Cornell, and he's like, I'm still trying to get this data, right? Still trying to figure out why welfare hasn't helped. It's only made things worse. Why affirmative action has only made things worse. And he's like, so I went over to the provost office and I started accessing data. And it's like, and I found out that 50% of all black kids at Cornell were on academic probation. And he said, and I found out that on average, all the black kids at Cornell were in the 75th percentile for SAT scores, while all the white kids were in the 99th percentile. And he said, and as a professor at Cornell, when you're supposed to be teaching to the 1%, he's like, you go fast and it's hard and it's crushing. And he's like, but they're the 1%. They're supposed to be able to handle it. He's like, but where you're only like 25%, you know, like it's exponential at that point. Like, he's like, it's not that. He's like, here's the thing. 90% of the schools across America, those kids would excel at. Why not send them somewhere where they would excel? But instead of affirmative action, drag them into a scenario where they got bogged down and beaten into a place where they feel like they were inferior to everybody else, when they could have been superior or at least on par with everybody else. But they pigeonholed them with affirmative action. They sent them to a place where they didn't thrive. And many of them just drop out because they're on academic probation because they can't fucking keep up. And a lot of this has to do with, sure, the IQ numbers are there. There is a disparity in IQ between blacks and whites in America, but that isn't because blacks are innately less intelligent. It's because they've been less taught. That disparity fizzles out when you go to just females. And in fact, black females overrepresent white males in college. Also, the disparity in income. Here's another interesting thing, because it's a really good marker for education. Disparity in income, if you look at for the amount of money their parents had, and you take a black boy and a white boy, the white boy's rich parents will predict him being more wealthy than the black boy's rich parents. So you can have their parents making the same amount of money, but on average, the black kid will not be as wealthy as the white kid when he grows up. Girls, it's different. It's exactly the same. Actually, black girls are even a little higher and higher than the white men if they're tracking for parents' income, right? Why is it that it's just black males that are lagging? Well, it's because a big part of young black male culture is to be against education, is to be against talking correctly, is to be, if you read too many books, you're acting white. If you talk correctly, you're acting white. So they put negative connotations on being intelligent, on learning, on being book smart, on doing all these things, having a career. When you put these negative connotations on it for these young kids, and there's no male role model in their life that they trust and respect to tell them that's fucking bullshit. No, get your ass in the books. It creates this vacuum, and we've seen what happens, but nobody wants to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. It's Whitey's fault. Well, yeah, it is. All you leftists who think you're helping, you're hurting. You're making things worse.
Right, because regardless of how the leftists want to shake it out, the leftists are made up 90% plus white people, educated white people, as a matter of fact, who have decided that their feelings, and this is my problem with white educated leftists in this country, is they're actually putting their feelings first ahead of any of the things that they're trying to get accomplished. Because you want to do something and you have good intentions to do it, but as an absolute abject failure, that is not victory. That's a failure. and to have the hard conversations and do the hard things and to bend people's feelings in a way that may harm them, but you get results and things start to change. That's a conversation worth having. I don't care what the individual is, and that's where we go completely wrong in this country and have been for a very long time. I don't care about the collective. I don't care about your personal feelings either. What I care about is individual liberty and true opportunity to be equalized for all people. And if we can get to that or even get close to that, then the color of your skin or the religion that you subscribe to, none of these things will matter at all, because only the cream of the crop will get there. How I know that we actually take a race of people who do IQ, intelligence, and education wise superior to over everyone in this country, including white people, are the Asians. And they're actually being discriminated against by not allowing them in to the top universities in this country because they're already overrepresented and they're being punished for that.
And they have, on average, the highest SAT scores, and they're well underrepresented for their population because they're putting a line on how many can get in these elite institutions.
Harvard, who is supposed to be the lefty bastion of true awesomeness, right? And everybody's equal and everything, unless, of course, you're Asian. Then we don't want you coming to our school anymore because, and it's not that they're trying to weed them out because they have too many. These kids are the top 1%. They're the top 1% of the top 1%, and they're being excluded simply because of their race.
Well, my favorite comparative study that Dr. Soul touches on in this analysis is there's a really great study where they take German teens who are black and they compare them by financial status, by their parents' financial status, and all of a sudden there's no difference. For some reason in Germany, because there's no black American culture in Germany, it's just German culture. You just happen to be black, and there isn't this whole fucking specter of, racism around every corner. They're not told that they're going to do worse. They're not told that it's not black to be smart and to talk well and to read books. So their culture is not redneck.
I do think it has something to do with their amazing beer culture as well.
but that redneck culture, so to back up now, that redneck culture that blacks unfortunately have taken on. So Dr. Soul, if you haven't heard us talk about it before, he wrote this incredible book called Black Rednecks and White Liberals. And it's just an amazing piece, a bunch of essays on the issues with black culture. And he goes through a lot of historical context to get to the info. And it's so cut and dry, and it's all cited academic. I mean, this guy's at the top of all the academic circles in economy and culture. So,
well, you know how you can tell a book like that is completely legitimate. Not to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
But to the audience, this is how you know. When the index to cite everything that all these essays and all the people involved in this, Thomas Sowell, particularly himself, is one of the largest chapters in your book, because they're citing everything they're saying. They're not just saying it. Like, I don't know, the books Barack Obama writes, for instance. No citations, because he's just making it up out of whole cloth. He's not giving you any facts. He's just giving you his feelings about it. Whereas Thomas Sowell is giving you the facts.
The people who don't like what Sowell has to say, they just don't talk about him, or they try to change the subject. His scholarship is unassailable. So,
and if you go on, and I would implore everybody to look him up on Rumble or YouTube or whatever you prefer to use, and listen to some of his discussions, especially at the intellectual think tanks, some of the hours-long discussions with him.
Absolutely.
If you are an educated white liberal, I beg you to listen to this man, because he will change your mind about the way that you think. He is brilliant. And what I love about his brilliance is he never talks to you in a way that he's the smartest guy in the room. He talks to you in a way like he's your grandpa, just trying to get you to understand the facts about what's going on and get over your emotional hissy fit that you're having.
He said his favorite thing about getting a PhD from Harvard is that he no longer has to be impressed by people who have PhDs
from Harvard.
That's my fucking guy, right?
And I heard. So he says that a lot. There's a thing on YouTube, and It's the something institute, and it's just like,
The Hoover. Or...
yeah, the Hoover Institute, and they have these catalogs of interviews with him that are just pure genius. When I go on long road trips, man, I just put them on to listen to them, man.
They're really good argument, heady discussions. But anyway, so he traces the history of black culture, American black culture, back to the Scottish Highlands and the British ghettos. Before people started taking boats over to the new country, what would become the United States, Scottish Highlanders and a lot of the ghetto Brits, the poor British that would make their way over, they would do, 4 to 5 years of indentured servitude, and then they'd be able to go make their way of it. And these people settled primarily in the South, and because it was cheaper, and you could kind of get away with a lot down there. There wasn't a lot of infrastructure or policing or anything. And that is where American redneck culture came from. These people would fight at the drop of a hat. They could not deal with being disrespected. They were violent with their women. They were drunkards. They were largely lazy. Soul writes about how there are many writings from the 1700s where white businessmen would go to the South and they couldn't find cheese because nobody would fucking churn it because it's too much work. And he's like, you'd be driving around and there'd just be cows on the road and wandering around, and he'd be like, well, what is going on? And he's like, well, there's no fences, I guess, because nobody's building fences. And basically, if you weren't a slave master, you probably didn't have fences, or, because you didn't do it. People were he just said it was a lot of drunkards, a lot of poverty, and a lot of laziness and a lot of fighting, and it just this kind of backwards ass culture. And it's what you still see today in all of the trailer parks across Appalachia, Southern Missouri, all over the country, and it's the same culture. But guess what? It's the same culture in Harlem. It's the same culture in Compton. It's the same culture all across these cities across America, because the blacks are doing the same thing. It's all about how you front. It's all about don't disrespect me, all about where I'm from, represent. It's all, fight at the drop of a hat, drunkenness, don't respect these bitches.
It's a gang mentality.
And absolutely. And so they adopted basically they emulated their captors. They adopted the same culture as the people that held them in bondage for years and years and years. And a lot of the people that the blacks became friends with, after slavery and in Reconstruction and Jim Crow and stuff, were just neighbors who were just other poor ass people who didn't have anything against them. They were just poor too, you know what I mean? But they were drunkard redneck fighters, And so then you put all these people on buses and you bus them out of there and you drop them in the middle of Detroit, and they just bring that culture with them, and you give them nothing but, a new place to live that they're completely unfamiliar with, and a fucking pittance, of welfare. And then you expect things to just magically work out. They would have been better off staying in the South, where people actually understood them and they understood people.
Yeah, there'd be something to be said too for these same people. In addition to that, when you're growing up in these larger inner cities, if you're a 12, 13, 14-year-old boy, your mom's addicted to drugs, maybe you've never met your father, the gang down around the street, they're protecting you, right? And then you fall into this kind of life that you're just to be accepted, to be understood, to gain any kind of respect in the world at all, even if it's from other violent gang members, is better than no respect at all, or at least the perception of it. And right. So we have a giant U.S. government leviathan that's all about their feelings these days, except for when it's the feelings of the people that they rule over. It's absurd to me. These boys in particular need help. Black girls in the ghetto are doing far better than black boys in the ghetto are. And that's a frightening thing to say, considering black women in the ghetto aren't doing all that well either. And they are doing precipitously better than the black guys are. And It's shocking. We have roughly 3% of our population committing half or more than half of all the violent crimes and taking up about 70% of all the jail spaces. But this is what our government and our society has done to these people, and then don't want to take any responsibility for it or have any real good plan to do anything about it. And then you end up with people like Al Sharpton, who are no different than the drug dealers in their communities. They're using their own communities as a way to enrich themselves and then continue to shit on their own communities when nobody's looking. It's horrific.
So, there are obvious things that work into this equation. This isn't completely individualized. There are legacies of slavery. There is a poverty element that stems from that. There is still racism. There are still racist ass people in the criminal justice system. I do think that blacks can be overrepresented in areas in prison where they've been over policed, where especially with drugs, because I think white kids are using drugs at the same rate.
You could say the same thing of poor up to middle class white people with DUIs. That's a very similar comparison.
Great point. So, this isn't all just black and white, for lack of a better term, but so you can come out with me all those other arguments and I'll acknowledge them, but they won't outweigh the fact that let's look at it like this. So that they used to break it down in smaller demographics, but right now the CDC only breaks it down in 1 to 25. So black males 1 to 25, their number one cause of death is homicide, 33%. Black males 26 to 50 is 24%. That's kind of how they break it down. But if you break it down at black males 15 to 24%, it's about 50%, about half die from homicide, and 90+% of them are other black males killing them.
Gang related, by the way, because
so your number one cause of death, black males, is other black fucking males. Why isn't this something that we're talking about?
Actually screaming about.
And why isn't this everything? Like my boy Delano was saying, he makes a valid point. He was like, 11-month-old kid gets shot in a stroller in Harlem, in New York the other day. And unless you're, in that precinct, you didn't see it on the news. But some black guy, wrestles with a cop and gets shot, and it's the biggest national story of all time. And it's like, that would be fine if that were, yes, tell those stories. But if you're not also telling all these other stories, you're mind fucking us, right?
If you're going to tell the story too, could we at least tell the truth about this story? If you're a long-term career criminal who has been arrested for multitudes of felony and misdemeanor violations that have spent more than half of your life in jail, let's not pretend you were just some guy minding his own business, walking down the street, and a bunch of police officers said, let's kill that motherfucker. We got nothing better to do today. Because, we're burning cities to the ground over really bad people. Does that mean that person deserved to die that day? Absolutely not. I wouldn't even suggest a thing like that. What I'm saying is that we need to keep it in perspective. You should be far, far, far more outraged about that 11-month-old girl who, just because of a drive-by shooting, gets clipped, living in an apartment that has nothing to do with nothing, and a bullet goes through the window and kills her. You should be far more outraged about that than George Floyd. I can promise you that, because George Floyd was a piece of shit human being who spent most of his life in jail and raped women, by the way. And we're burning cities down for him. Not one person gave a care about that little girl in the Compton who caught a bullet for no other reason than because she happened to live at the wrong goddamn address.
Yep.
No outrage for that. You want to burn cities down, burn it down for that.
Yep.
Not George fucking Floyd.
I'm trying to see.
Or Mike Brown or any of these guys. Look, there's no, regardless. If the cop knows that they're dealing with, you can't just blanketly say everybody deserves to be treated the same. If I know I'm rolling up on a guy and I'm a police officer, and I know that guy, I know him by reputation. I know he's a rapist. I know he has beaten people. I know he's put guns in people's faces to steal from them. I know he's a drug addict. Gonna act a little different than if I roll up on my mom, right?
Right.
My mother's never committed a crime in her life, and I have nothing to fear from her. They're massively different things. And we're just, and this is the the problem. Our press is using things to their advantage, for them to spin things, for them to get clicks, for them to get advertisers and to make money. And if they burn the entire black community to the ground while they do it, they don't care. They'll just continue to do it.
So I like to get into one of the more controversial parts of this conversation, which is the interracial crime. We've been speaking about intra-racial, where people attack their own race, and that is the most common type of murder for sure.
As you most associate with and live around.
As a white person, it would be asinine for me to go around saying that I'm scared of the black people that are going to come and kill me, because I have a so much higher likelihood of being killed by a white person than I ever would a black person.
Yeah, don't piss me off.
That said, if you flip it around the other way, I frequently see people on TikTok or something like that. So usually some black young male, or I'm sorry, female, who's in like a women's studies, degree, she's getting a women's studies degree at some liberal arts school. And she's talking about how she literally feels, every day in danger as long as white people are in the majority. So with that, let's look at the stats. As the last time they actually compiled this, completely.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
A really easy way to say that is, if you are a black person walking down the street of a community that is 99% white, the people that live there, the white people, not through racism, just out of general curiosity, are going to be going, what the hell are you doing here? By the way, if you go to the Compton and you're a white guy from middle America and you happen to be walking down the street there, those black people are going to be going, what the fuck is that guy doing here?
Yeah, you're out of place for sure.
Right.
However, I have a much higher likelihood of dying in that scenario as a white man in the black neighborhood than vice versa.
That's sadly true.
But
to your point, that white girl who felt more comfortable if there were more white people in the room, she's far, far, far more likely to be raped or sexually assaulted by a white guy.
Who? The white girl?
Yeah, the girl you were saying, or is it a black girl?
That was a black girl saying she does not feel safe in this country until white people are not the majority.
Oh,
as a black woman,
I got you.
She will always feel unsafe and scared because white people run the place, and she fears for her safety because white people.
Would she say the same thing? If
droves of white maniacs murdering people,
right. And if Asians were in control, she would probably say the same thing.
So, what I'm getting at is, if you're the black person walking through the all white neighborhood, and I'm not talking about a rich neighborhood. Let's say you're walking through a trailer park that's all white.
We'll call it Florida.
There you go. You have a 1 in a million chance, 1 in 1 million roughly, a 0.0000001 chance of being murdered by a random white person. That means there's, in 2018, was roughly 234 black people killed by white people. And there were almost 3,000 white people killed by white people. But in that same year, there were 514 blacks. So more than double blacks killed whites, I should say. More than double whites were killed by blacks, even though we represent 5 times the population as whites. And I'm not saying we. Yes, I'm a white guy, so that's why I'm saying we. I don't have any other group affiliation other than that. I'm just using it for simple terms here. So yes, that means you are 6 times more likely. You have a 1 in 100,000 chance of being murdered as a white person walking through the black neighborhood. 1 in 1,000 versus 1 in 1 million. 10 times. That's what it is. 10 times. My bad. So
higher magnitude. That's
now, if you're black on black, if you're the black person, you're 5 times more likely to be killed by a black person than you are by a white person. And it's, it's not even close. It's 6 out of 100,000. And actually, my guy Delano would say 7. I understand that some of these are because there's though all these data get cleaned up later. Certain cases get changed. They cold cases get solved. So the data change, but this is all pretty close. So whites represent 198 in back in 2018, 198 million people out of 327 million, 61% of the population, and they represent 49% of the murderers. Okay, the killers. Blacks, 41 million out of 327. They represent 13% of the population. And they represent 51% of the murders. So more than half, 13% versus 61%. And like you said, let's really boil it down to about 3 to 4%. It's really just young black males that are really guilty of about 50%. 3% of the country is guilty of 50% of the murders.
Ironically, black women don't have any higher of a murder rate than white women do, and of course, they're in the black community. You have to take the population of children under a certain age out and people over a certain age because their numbers are so small. While they're still there, they have no impact on anything. So you're really boiling it down. So let's say it's 13%. There's still more women than there are black men. So we'll say the black is around 6.5 of that would be black. And then if you extrapolate out all those who couldn't possibly be involved in this, what we're really talking about are black teenage boys starting at around 13 or 14 till about 30 years old. That small sect of them, which is around 3%, they are the ones who are responsible for 99 point something percent of those murders and violent crimes. And mostly against each other, by the way.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at places like New York, for instance, New York City is probably the most diverse city. It's
a melting pot, right?
Yeah, it's probably the most diverse city in the country. It's certainly the most diverse in the North, and probably the most in the country. You have, a segment of blacks, a segment of whites, and a segment of Spanish, and then there's Asian. I mean, it's a diverse community. And your demographics are closer than anywhere else. You have a high murder rate, obviously, and you have blacks being victimized. Like 98% of the victims are black and Hispanic, even though these are very close, demographically, racially. Why is it that so many blacks and Hispanics are dying? It's the gang culture. It's unfortunately the culture that has been adopted, and if we can't talk about it, we won't ever change it. And if their leaders won't look at them and go, guys, we got to clean up our own act. We got to quit. Here's another good point that Delano made. Why is it that black culture gives so much power to white words? Why is it that only white words seem to make a difference? Only if the white man says the wrong word does it have power. So if the point he makes is Snoop Dogg can throw around the N-word and he gets to smoke reefer with Martha Stewart. But if Don Imus says the wrong thing, he gets drummed off of all the air, and it's supposed to everybody's supposed to be all up in arms and completely devastated by what this white guy said. But if a black guy says it, no big deal. And so why are you giving them that privilege for their words to have so much meaning?
Well, I like where you're going with that, because if words have power, then they have equal power for everyone.
Well, and if you give them more power,
or none, just depends on what you're doing with it, right?
And why would you offer that power to the person you think is your oppressor, right?
Or give them more power than they deserve, just for really a word, because the word itself doesn't mean anything. It's the intentions behind the word.
It's just like the first time I ever made an argument like this, and somebody called me a racist, Ed, it hurt me at first. It fucking means nothing to me now.
Right. I don't care what people think about me. Christ.
I don't give your words power.
Right. I'm not. Look, you can go around and say whatever you want about me. I have said to people who have heard things about me that were wrong, that made them check up and go, oh my God, could he have done a thing like that? And then when they have a conversation with me about it or bring it up, I say the same thing every time. You know me. You've known me for X amount of time. We've had numerous conversations. You know who I am and you know my character. If that's what you think about me, please exit my life and never talk to me again. If
Mhm.
you don't know who I am by now, you for sure aren't going to find out. So get
Or
to
if you're
stepping,
just so
go away. I don't care.
simple-minded, if you're just so simple-minded that you would think in such simple terms, I don't even have time for you, right? Like I
Go away.
don't need to waste my time talking to you.
It makes no difference to me
I'm
what
looking for
you
thinkers.
believe.
Yeah.
And by the way, you can call me any name that you like, and I'm not going to get my underwear in a bunch about it. I could really care less.
Yeah.
Because your personal thoughts or emotions about me as a person impact me zero.
Yeah, and I'm certainly going to teach my son better than to get all pissed off and come try to fight you over it.
Right. So I think it goes to we have so many issues when it comes to this kind of stuff. First off, we have a lot of confused people in the inner cities, especially young people. They have broken families. They don't go to school regularly. Even if they do go to schools, their schools are shit.
Mhm.
And these are, generally speaking, this is all in the politicians. The people that a good section of the people in this country think should be in charge of our healthcare have totally fucked our educational system up.
The charter schools were working in New York, and now they're trying to destroy them.
That's right, because we can't have that going, because we can't indoctrinate you if you're going to a school that doesn't have to follow the curriculum that we prescribe for everybody.
And that can kick you out if you're an asshole.
I mean, right. We're more concerned about whether or not we can flip children and transgender them and teach them that the community and how they feel about you and how they pat you on the back, make you feel good about yourself, supersedes your own blood family. It's just absurd, all the things that we're doing. The politicians in this country, in this particular case, the Democrat politicians in the larger cities, they have literally uniformly destroyed the inner city culture, primarily black people in those inner cities, run by black Democrats in those cities. And then they turn around and they want to point fingers and blame everybody else for it. There is a contingent, a hell of a lot of people that would really love to help, except we're held at such suspect for no other reason than the thing you're upset about, being valued because of the color of your skin.
Here's your real racism. If you're so busy trying to defend trans rights because you're worried about their suicidality, which the amount of trans kids killing themselves would not just pale in comparison, would be completely evaporated off the page in comparison to all the black youth that are killing each other in the streets. It's not even close. And if you're more caught up in the trans rights issues than you are in the fact that there's a plague of young black men dying every day in the streets, you're a racist. How do you like that?
Just think about that. That's well said. Just think about that for a second. In Chicago, it's a holiday weekend, and holiday weekends, everything goes up every time. You and I both know that in Chicago, there are going to be probably a few hundred shootings from Friday till the end of today. And there's going to be probably dozens and dozens of murders. And of those people, the vast, vast majority of them are going to be between 15 and 28-year-old black men and boys. That's exactly what it's going to be. Now, they're going to be a random person that got caught up in the shooting, had nothing to do with it, because that happens every time too. And you know what the national news is going to say about all that? Nothing. Not a word.
No.
Nope. And by the way, if a bunch of black police officers roll up and start strong arming people and knocking around innocent people for no other reason than cause, you're not going to hear about that either, because they're so sold on a narrative of systemic racism. I mean, as a white guy in this country, when I listen to the regular mainstream media, generally speaking, it sounds to me what they're saying is that I am an absolute abhorrent racist for no other reason than cause. There's no logical explanation for it. Here's something that most people that are on the left always find shocking when they hear me say this. I've never met a racist in my entire fucking life. I'm a white guy from middle America in Pennsylvania, born and raised. I've never met a racist that I can remember that was ever around me, that I ever hung around, that wore. She would have talked about shaving our heads and going and let's burn down a church or whatever. Let's go put up swastikas on the temple over there. I mean, nothing ever.
Probably.
Not even a smelling distance of it. So where's it at actually?
I would say anybody who knew my grandfather, who's passed away now, and they didn't know him, but they just happened to cursory hear him speak in very racist terms often, like throwing the N-word around and racial epithets, and even as a kid, I'm like, whoa, can you say that, And then you find out his best friend is a black man from Kansas City. And that black man actually bought my first shotgun and was his best friend. They were fucking boys, dude. And it's oh yeah, you're right. It's because deep down inside, he's really not a bad guy. He's really not. He doesn't hate because someone's black. It is just cultural of saying dumb shit, and was he prejudiced? Yeah, fuck yeah, he was prejudiced. But if you were black and you were a good person, he didn't give a shit what color your skin was,
Everybody's prejudiced, by the way. Everybody.
Yeah.
I'm prejudiced against white girls with 80s hairstyles from a trailer park. I'm totally prejudiced against that. Right? All kidding aside, everybody's got a prejudice against something, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, I got severe prejudice against you. You for Oakland Raiders fans, for obvious reasons, right? But that's still a prejudice. Everybody's prejudice. Am I a racist? Go fuck yourself. No, that's absurd. But when the people that represent government in particular, and these giant failures are here for everybody to see, and you want to point any of them out, well, the easiest for them to do is scream at me that I'm a racist or a homophobe or transphobe or whatever phobia I probably have, all to straw man me and get everybody to turn on me and end the argument or the conversation simply because they don't have any ideas on how to truly try to fix any of the problems that we're talking about. They don't want to be held to account for it, so they just yell out epitaphs. No different than the epitaph that they don't ever want to hear any white person saying about a black person. We're just gonna point fingers and call you names and call you epitaphs because, well, we don't have any solutions. And they don't. And any government solution, screw racism or any of that. We don't have a solution for anything. They don't have a solution for public education. They have no solution for how to get the nuclear family stronger in the inner city. And on top of that, they don't want a stronger. They did it on purpose. They want it to fall apart. That's part of Marxism, people.
Agreed.
Wake the fuck up.
Agreed.
And the white community is now on the chopping block. They're after us harder than they've ever been. They're trying to make white males derelict pieces of shit, and they're trying to get white women to move away from wanting to be married to them long term because they need to destroy the sanctity of the family and remove any sort of belief system, whether it's a higher power you believe in, no matter what that higher power is. They need to destroy all of it because they need government to be the father and they need the government to be the God. They need both of those things for their utopian, horrific, dystopian view of the future to come to fruition.
Yeah, true story. I would say the good news is that the one good part about this trend, this is dark, but ultimately the one good thing about this trend is that all these psycho Marxists, for some reason these days, they're sterilizing all their kids. So I guess they're going to eventually attrition's going to happen.
Well, that's right. Because yeah, I think it's kind of irony when it comes to abortion, right? That the people who are fighting the hardest for the inner city, particularly a black community, to save their children and to allow their communities to become larger and stronger are the very people you're calling racist. Seems to me you want to commit euthanasia against an entire population. That's about as racist as it fucking gets. Am I right? Or am I right? Come on. So
If
39 million
50%,
abortions in the black community since Roe v. Wade was enacted. That's as much as the people they have right now.
yeah, I think it's like 50% these days of black births are aborted. And then another, and then, 50-50, or I'm sorry, your 50% of your homicides or your deaths
Right.
are homicides. So like you're killing yourselves, in one way or another. But so just to bring it back to
But to
the
be
cultural
fair,
issue.
to just one more thing, and
Okay.
when it comes to the black community, particularly the inner city black community, if you're Tarzan and you're raised in the jungle by chimpanzees, well, you believe you're a chimpanzee because you don't know any different. People have to be responsible for themselves. But there's also something to be said for the fact that if there's no light at the end of the tunnel, or there's no other way of life. Look, if you grow up as a sheep farmer in the Irish Hills, and you've never seen anything but sheep farming in the Irish Hills, then it doesn't occur to you can do anything other than sheep farm in the Irish Hills. And if everybody your uncles, to all your mom's friends, to all the people around you, are all in gangs, well, then you just assume you're supposed to be in a gang. I grew up in a neighborhood where I thought I was supposed to be riding my bike and going fishing and playing baseball every day. So that's what we fucking did.
Yep.
And so we can help all these people up and out. But first, we have to all collectively start to show them a better way forward, instead of just screaming everybody down who wants to help and calling them racist because it doesn't fit your personal narrative of how to do it.
Well, yeah. Here's my advice. The solution to it all is look at the person in the mirror. That's where it starts. Michael Jackson said it. He said it right. It starts with you in the mirror. Don't be a redneck. Number one. Stop acting like being disrespected is the end all. Like it's the end of the world. Like you got to shoot somebody because they disrespected you. The biggest disrespect you'll ever do to yourself is getting yourself locked in a freaking cage for the rest of your life, you dumbass. Second of all, it shouldn't be bad or looked down upon to get an education or to do well or to speak well or to have a career. So stop being a redneck. Again, no matter what color you are, stop being a redneck. It's not a bad thing to succeed. It's not a bad thing to not be drunk all the time, and it's not a bad thing to take care of your kids, to be a good role model. But bigger than that, I'm imploring, as my boy Delano Squires says, the 5 Ps, I think he called it. It was the pundits, the politicians, the preachers, the players, and it was something for entertainers. I can't remember.
Pedophiles.
The players. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, pedophiles, right? But anyway, he was saying, all of these black, leaders, these people in black leadership positions, it's up to you to stop turning to the white man and telling him what he can do and telling him what classes he needs to take and books he needs to read and ways he needs to change to help black people out. Instead, turn towards your own people, towards your own young men and call them to the carpet and demand they put their frickin' guns down and they stop shooting each other and start making it a daily conversation where you call this out and where you demand the violence stops, where you show up in person on the ground with your crew, with your posse. All these gangbanger kids are going to show up for your autograph. And then you have a chance to stand on your soapbox and tell them, put these damn guns down. Stop this damn gang bullshit. Here, I'm going to cut you all a freaking check to build a communities. Whatever. Put your money where your mouth is. LeBron James, shut the fuck up. I know you do a lot of shit. I know you do a lot of charities. But until you sit there and call out the community, call out the culture that is causing the biggest problems in Black America, until you do that, you're bullshit, dude. And because you're one of the biggest liars of them all.
Well, here's the thing. The LeBron James, the Stephen A. Smiths, Barack Obamas, especially in the culture that we have today, if any of them were to speak up like we are doing today and talk about the things that we're talking about today we're not worried about reprisals. They are. LeBron James could potentially lose hundreds of millions of dollars if he were to actually tell the truth. And so he won't do it. That's all these people
Fuck
are
you,
doing
LeBron.
are protecting themselves. Oh yeah.
How much money do you need?
The people that I respect are people like Jason Whitlock, who we brought up earlier. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who is one of the number one guys on the largest sports shows in the world, getting paid big money, but he refused to play their game. Mm-hmm. And he ended up working for his hometown newspaper back in Missouri, right? Because he wasn't willing to play the game. Now he still goes out and he does his thing, but I guarantee you Jason Whitlock is making 1/3, maybe less than 1/3 of what he was at his heyday. And he doesn't care because Jason's out there still speaking the truth. But these other guys, Stephen A. Smith, he's so full of nobody's more full of shit than Stephen A. Smith ever. And all he's trying to do is protect his brand. That's what LeBron's doing, protecting his brand. So if you're not going to get up and get out there and speak truth to power and try to move forward, you guys have real money. LeBron James, does anybody make more money than him in sports? It's rare, right?
Yeah.
But he's always a top 10 guy.
Yeah, the owner of his team.
Do something with that, right? Do something with it.
I agree. No doubt. Yeah, like I said, go down into the hood and start talking to these people. Start telling them to stop this shit. You know, they will listen to you.
Well, put your money into it. Fight back. Go, we're bringing you. We're not getting rid of charter schools.
Right.
We are going to do this. We're going to get our own re-education programs. We're going to set this up. He doesn't have to fund the whole thing. If he set something up that worked well and got people educated, brought families back together, people would be glad to pour money into something like that, especially the people it helps.
Look how many white house moms from suburbia dumped $20 million into Black Lives Matter, no question asked, and they didn't do a damn thing for anybody,
right?
Except for themselves.
Oh,
bought some houses.
The white liberal women who did that get to pat themselves on the back while they're drinking their fucking wine,
their wine spritzers,
right, in their $500,000+ homes, or while they're on vacation, and talk about that and how good they are, and pat themselves on the back. Oh yeah, I gave money to blah blah blah,
and I have two transgender children.
Right.
Can you believe it? 2 out of 3. Who would have thought?
It's so crazy. 3 out of 3 of my children are gay or transgender. And I'm doing
well, yeah. I mean, job. The other kid's gay. I didn't mention him. He's not.
And he's also transracial. It's just, and then they'll claim they have a black child on top of it because their kid identifies as a black rapper. I mean, come on, get the fuck over yourself. Don't make it a bad thing that that women are getting educated in this country. It should have been a good thing, not a negative. Stop it already. It's just so these are the women are the same ones who, who doesn't accept men being women? Men. Women accept men being women, but men don't. It's just so weird to me. Like, what is happening in this country? But to stick more to the point of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, we should probably wrap it.
I think that there is a way up and a way out. This is part 1, if we didn't mention that, because this is just too long. We'll get into some of that other things later. But the destruction of the inner city home, primarily black people, but the inner city home overall, and I'm just talking about in poverty, right? And that could be a white trailer park too, right? It breeds more poverty. And so there has to be a way up and out. And there are ways to do that. It's just nobody seems to want to do it because our politicians and these people who walk around alleging that they represent these communities don't represent the communities. They represent their own bank accounts. Black Lives Matter is a perfect example of representing your own bank account while shitting all over your own community. Amen. Literally shitting on them. Now they're in bankruptcy. So they're done. It's over for them.
Yeah, no doubt. I wonder what'll happen. I wonder if anybody will get any money back. So. Oh,
no. And what's going to happen is they're going to file bankruptcy, but bankruptcy court doesn't go, oh, well, at least you tried. Keep everything you have. It's not how that works.
No.
So these multi-million-dollar homes that they own and all that stuff, it's just going to be taken away. I mean, they had the audacity to give the woman who head up the whole thing. Her name escapes me. Did she just give her brother some $1 million security contract for when he has absolutely no background in security at all?
Patrice Cullors gave her little skinny, little tiny, little twiggy little brother who has no expertise whatsoever. $1.7 million security contract, of which he is employee number 1 of 2. So I'm sure the payroll was very extensive for that $1.7 million. You had to divvy that up among both employees. And I'm sure they needed a lot of gear, probably like some black clothes or shirt that said security on it. So
yeah. There's one more thing I'd like to bring up before I let this go for everybody listening. And just keep this in mind. So this is from FBI crime data as reported by the Washington Post. The top 10 U.S. cities with the most overall violent crime rates are all run by Democrats, all of them. And as a matter of fact, the top 34 are all run by Democrats, except for one, number 17, which is Jacksonville, Florida. And of the U.S. cities with the most violent crime per 10,000 people, violent crime, meaning, get beaten up or robbed, raped, those sorts of things. All 10 out of 10, again, are all Democrat or non-Republican run cities, with the exception of one. It's not Republican run. 9 are Democratic one. One has an independent mayor, but a Democrat city council. So that's just food for thought. This is not a coincidence that all these things are the same. And until we start to figure out how we're going to correct this, it starts, and this will be the last thing I say because we'll continue on with this at a later date.
I got you.
We have to figure out how to get the populace of these cities to start voting away from the way that they've been voting now for generations that have created this problem. And that's regardless of political affiliation. You cannot expect good results if you put the same party in power decade after decade after decade after decade, because it will just by matter of course become corrupt because they have no fear of not being in charge.
Totally agree with you. I do think that needs to change. However, I think this, again, the very first change every person needs to make is individual and look in the mirror and change what it is about themselves and not rely on a vote or a politician to fix things. You have to fix where you're standing, right where you're standing. You got to look around you and see what you can fix. What can you clean up? Like Jordan Peterson says, start with cleaning your damn room. If you live in a shithole, you're not gonna be motivated to do anything. Just start by cleaning up. And that's a step in the right direction,
Right. Baby steps.
Yeah. And so before I even thought about some sort of change through politics or government, I'd be looking at how I could change my room. My house is a big thing. How can I change my own household? And then how can I change my building, my neighborhood, my community, on right here on the ground, local to me. And I think that until we start looking at that, and again, because that's on you. What happens in your community and around you is on you. And if you're too busy trying to call somebody else out, from the capital of your state or the federal government that's thousands of miles away from you, what a waste of time. And you're lazy.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting.
No. I wasn't saying that you're wrong.
Political action committee is the first way for you to go.
But you're right. That has to change too.
I'm not even suggesting that the people in the inner city will ever have any control or be able to do anything about that.
If you've had a Democrat mayor for 60 fucking years, there's probably should change, right?
I would say that there is there's a very large contingent of people in this country who live nowhere near these cities. But it is the politics that they back and the money that they put behind the politics that affect those cities. Those people need to make a change as well. As for the inner city people, it's saving yourself. Isn't it funny? Because to your point, There was at one time in New York City and then branched out to Philadelphia, Baltimore, Boston, and others in the Northeast, the Guardian Angels, and became a very positive influence inside of these cities. They built places for the kids to go, to hang out, to learn self-defense. And of course, they've all been crushed underfoot by politics. They write regulations, making them illegal. And the Guardian Angels who are protecting people are now going to jail for protecting people.
There you go.
And right. And so it cost them so much money as an organization defending themselves that they couldn't keep up. So that's the point I'm making is the apparatus
Speaking of that,
is there to keep you underfoot.
Speaking of that, and Daniel Penny, if you're dumb enough to go to New York City anymore, I don't know what to tell you. It's hard. I feel bad for Daniel Penny, but anybody who's seen that and who's seen everything else that's been going on, how violent and out of control it's become, and how a lot of these violent people aren't even held to any account. But if you defend yourself, you are to the highest standards. I would never set foot unless there was a dramatic change, a complete reversal in New York. I'm never going back. I'm glad I got to go and I did, but I have zero plans to ever go back unless there's a dramatic reversal. And one more point, I like to talk about the race thing. I think is really funny too, is when white people leave a black neighborhood, it's white flight. When they move in, it's gentrification. Pick one.
Right.
With that.
So we will pick this up next week and we will continue on. This is a very multi-layered subject. I hope that if you gained or garnered anything out of this is while we expect people to be responsible for themselves, we do understand that the apparatus around them are crushing them underfoot. And we all need to be responsible for our neighbors, whether that neighbor is in a large city 100 miles away from you or more, or your neighbor right beside you, right? We got to be responsible for one another. And we have to step away from the apparatus and just simply do the right thing and stop expecting government to come in and fix things, because that's not what they do.
Amen. So couldn't said it better myself. And with that, thanks for tuning in, guys. Catch us next week, and we will catch you then. Later.
Peace out.